Sir Isaac Newton, he, in my opinion, is one of the greatest scientists ever. In 1666, he postulated the three laws of motion. The three laws of motion at that time was the cornerstone of the scientific revolution, which began 3 decades earlier. How did he do it? Would you like to know how? Simple, isn't it? What he did was he sat under the apple tree, and the apple fell on his head. Instead of getting annoyed, he just walked in. He made an observation of how the apple fell to the ground. He found that the apple fell on the shortest path to the ground. From that observation, he derived the three laws of motion. So in other words, Isaac Newton, observing the natural environment, postulated the three laws of motion. Now I expand on this. I am Dr. Michael Oon. I worked as a forensic scientist with Scotland Yard's laboratories in London for 20 years. In modern parlance, it's now known as CSI in the TV series. What I used to do was I forensically examined items and then prepared evidence from there. That evidence was then presented to a court of law with me being an expert witness. I did this for a long time. When I was doing casework, I always wondered, where did this crime occur? But what I did notice is that crime only occurred, or majority of crime occurred in particular addresses or in particular regions. Areas around there did not have any crime. Of course, I started asking these questions. Why is it these areas? I started asking, and then we had discussions. A friend of mine, who was an expert about town planning and things like that, he just said, why don't you go back to your roots, Chinese heritage? What he meant was, the answer could be in Feng Shui. So, being me, the first thing I did, I went to a number of seminars. I read a number of books on Feng Shui. They all told a different story. I was not happy with this. So I went to a number of seminars. I asked the teachers, where did you get this information? This is always the first question of any investigation. Where does the information come from? After much interrogation or questioning us, they don't like it to be questioned. They said books. A lot of them said books. So I said to myself, how can you teach a practical subject from a written word? When you do a driving test, you need a practical instructor. So I said, I'll go and ask some practitioners. Maybe I'll learn from them. But I think I asked too many questions. They all turned me down. Anyway, 2 years later, I stumbled upon a practitioner, and she was asking for students. Yeah, being me, the first thing I did was ask questions. So my first question was, where did you get the information from? And the answer was so different. The information is ancient, it's undocumented, and it has gone through 14 generations. So my first question was, what do you mean by 14 generations? It could be 14 times 1 year each. She said, no. They're roughly 30, 40 years a generation. So you work backwards, it's 500 years, and takes you back to the Ming or early Qing dynasty. So what she's saying was, this information is unwritten. Now, I said, why is it unwritten? People in China, most of them could not read or write, so everything was done by word of mouth. When it goes to the first one generation, it is that the information is then verified. So you have the verification of the various generations over the 500 years. So I said, what happens with new technology, 20th century, 21st? I've corrected for that. I said, okay, it sounds good. It's better than books. So the next question I asked, what's your credibility? She said, I work with governments doing infrastructure projects. Not many Feng Shui consultants do that. So I said, what's your main occupation? Is it consulting, or why do you want students? My main job is consulting. I know the practical stuff. The reason I want students is that I'm starting the 15th generation. I said, why are you teaching then? It is my duty to start the 15th generation so that the information or the knowledge goes on. So then why do you call it traditional Feng Shui? As you know, it's 500 years old. All the procedures, all the selections, all the knowledge, all the practice have gone through the 500 years. He said, don't you think that could be called traditional? I said, yeah, impressive. But you mean you select people? I thought, being a Singaporean person, I thought, I'm a bit kiasu, so I said, can I pay you so I can get selected? No, you have to be selected. It was a no-go area. You have to be selected. You follow that criteria. Anyway, fortunately, I was selected. I didn't realize there were 400 candidates. In the end, there were about 8 that were selected in the final group. The training was tough. It was 10 years. And now, I'm very fortunate to be working in an international team of 4, so I have 3 other colleagues, and we work on big projects around the world. Now, me as a scientist, why would I say it is a science? We have seen Isaac Newton using observation to come a law of physics. Traditional Feng Shui, or Feng Shui, started with the rise of Chinese culture 4,000 years ago. The sages noticed what happened in the natural environment. They noted it. 500 years ago, they started putting remedies in, and that's what we call Feng Shui, or traditional Feng Shui. So that is what I'm talking about. What it is about is traditional Feng Shui is a science. At this stage, I'll just go through at least 4 case studies. The bards of old noticed when energy travels, it travels usually in a straight line. But in modern society, we have things called road junctions, when energy turns a right angle. So when energy turns at a right angle at a road junction, that area there is very good for coffee shops and cafes. Do you know what I'm saying now? There is a particular brand of coffee shops that locate at these junctions. It's Starbucks. They're the largest coffee chain in the world. There are almost 40,000 outlets in 83 countries. They have used Feng Shui. So in other words, whenever you see a Starbucks, most of them are at junctions. But the part that they don't tell you is what happens inside. Have you noticed when you go to Starbucks, there are comfy chairs, armchairs, settees, tables. In the 90s, they introduced free Wi-Fi. Some Starbucks have even fireplaces. What they're trying to do is to create your second living room to make you comfortable so you come back again. But from the Feng Shui point of view, you're retaining the energy. By people staying there, you're retaining the energy. Okay, that's the first example. The second example is a large shop that uses 2 doors. I think you know when I say it. It's IKEA. We go through the entrance, then you go through a long labyrinth of room displays. At the quickest, most people take 1 hour. Can you see the retaining of energy? So the key point for that, they want you to stay there and the building retains energy. They've got another trick. You go through the cash register, they have a temptation there. It's called the snack bar. What it's meant for? You're meant to stay there. So in other words, you're paying IKEA money so that they can get the retained energy for themselves. Okay? That's very subtle traditional Feng Shui at work. Note, at this stage, it's very important you want to retain energy. So I had another client. She's very, very well paid. She's an internet security boss lady, very high-powered, but she had one hobby, doing interior decorations of her house, changing walls to different colors. If she was bored of a color, she would change and then call me and things like that. Anyway, the house was quite settled. You go in, you go to the main room, the energy then transfers all over the place. So I think probably when I was away somewhere, she decided to do something different. What it was you come in, you turn right to the main room. On the left, she created a passageway to the toilets, then to the exit. Guess what happened? A few days later, she lost her job. The first thing she did, she called me. I said, your property is not retaining energy, so block it. She blocked it. She told her agency, this is the job I want. She put about 30% more on her salary. She got it in a few days. Anyway, she's very happy. I still have her as a client because she likes to mess about with her house. The last example is about the importance of the decoration within the house. So there was a celebrity in the UK. She was the face of a fitness and health product. She had it on the local media, the UK media, and she was quite happy. With that money, she started doing scuba diving. And she started scuba diving on wrecks. So she had a fascination of shipwrecks. So the next thing she did was she plastered one wall of famous wrecks of the world. On the other wall, her photographs of shipwrecks, of what she had scuba dived. She lost the contract because her career went shipwreck. So what happened next was I was called and I said, don't you know? You don't want shipwrecks. You want positive things, where you want to be. But the other trick I did was where she had her desk, computers, things like that, which was her wealth area. I said, put a picture of your aims. So she said, I want to be the face of an international campaign of the product throughout the world, TV, media, print media. About 6 months later, she got it to her big picture. Okay, I've just given you 4 examples of how traditional Feng Shui works. So in other words, traditional Feng Shui, in my opinion, is a science because it's based on observations of the natural environment and it is reproducible. To any scientist here, whether medical science or physical science, reproducibility is a key factor. So in other words, I have shown you something very different through a new lens. So I'm offering you a different perspective of this situation. Thank you.